Hi, RA.
Hi, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Can't complain. It's a nice day. It's kind of spring out. Oh, plus this little surprise popped into my life. Earbuds,
Hmm.
Samsung Galaxy Buds worth $120. You know how much I paid for them, RA?
Did you get them off the back of a truck?
Zero. I paid $0 for them. And you know why?
Why?
Because the corporate titans who increasingly dominate our political system seem to be incompetent. Okay, let me tell you how this happened. It's like Samsung had a deal. You pre-order the S10 Galaxy phone, you get the free earbuds, $120 value. Now, I ordered them and it says, okay, I pre-ordered the phone and I get this email. It says, you get the earbuds in a month. And I thought, well, that stands to reason because you got 2 weeks to return the phone. They're not going to send them to you until they know you're not going to return the phone for a refund, right?
Hmm.
Now, as it happens, I returned the phone within the 2 weeks. Nonetheless, the buds showed up. It kind of makes you wonder whether the oligarchs who run this country are really worthy of the political power we've given them. If they can't even, of course, Samsung oligarchs don't run our country; they run Korea.
Yeah,
But
it's a
still,
screen
but
company.
no, but AT&T was involved in this. It was actually I returned it to AT&T. You would think there was a standard, communication channel set up. You'd think it would be automatic, right?
Hmm.
Then again, you'd think that the following wouldn't have happened. Let me tell you what else happened when I returned the phone. I give him the phone. He says, $45 restocking fee. I say, I guess I'll have to live with it. He does all the stuff and he goes, okay, here's your receipt with your refund. Your refund is 52 cents. I said, 52 cents. Phone cost $900. 899.48 seems a little steep for a restocking fee. You said it was 45. He says, oh, you paid for the whole thing up front? I said, yeah. He said, oh, I thought you were just on a monthly plan. Now, REA, isn't it a little shocking that when you return something at AT&T, I'm not going to spend much more time on this, but the computer doesn't immediately kind of handle everything and tap into some database that knows how you handled the original transaction?
Yeah, that's pretty strange.
So this is the guy I was dealing with, and this is the computer I was dealing with. So maybe it's not so shocking that news did not get to Samsung about the return. And I would ask all viewers and listeners to keep quiet about this. I'm
So
not.
are we going to do like an unboxing video with your earbuds now and see?
I'll tell you, that is the ticket to YouTube stardom. I have failed to find the ticket. But
The
that
guy, yeah, this is maybe you vaguely remember this. There's a guy. I think his name is Marquise Brownlee, who's like the top kind of tech reviewer on YouTube.
I think I've watched his videos actually.
Yeah, so he went to the same high school I did, but he's like,
Now wait, is he African American?
yes,
Yeah. I think I'm a fan. Yeah.
yeah, he's like really one of the top tech reviewers, and he happened to play Ultimate Frisbee, which I did also in high school. So I know people who know him. I don't know him exactly. I remember we got his email at one point, and when he was just kind of like a star before he became a superstar, tried to get him on Blogging Heads TV for an interview. Never heard back. He's moved far beyond the stratosphere of shared high school ties to have any interest in that. And yeah, so so check that guy out, I guess, if you're into tech.
That reminds me, we forgot to introduce you. We didn't mention your show, Culturally Determined, which airs sometimes on Blogging Heads TV and sometimes on Meaning of Life TV, depending on exactly what it's about. But in any event, is available at the Culturally Determined podcast feed place on your smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And also, your last name is Cohen Wade. By the way, do you know if there's an REA Cohen on Twitter? I came
Yeah,
across.
we follow each other.
Uh-huh.
There's an Ari Cohen with a K. There's people out there.
Because REA is an unusual name.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I digress. Also, you help put out the newsletter,
Yes.
which is actually not going out this week, at least not in its usual form. Anyway, this is a video for patrons, and we're gonna maybe deal with a little email. First of all, can I just read an email from Aaron McNally, because there's nothing more heartening than reading an email from Aaron McNally. He is a consistent source of uplift and commendation. What's he commending us for? Wait, where's the damn email where he commends us for something? I'm determined to find it. Here it is, from Aaron McNally, MRN reader and patron. It's a strange and marvelous thing that a countercultural outlier newsletter that self-identifies as a member of the resistance is actually more balanced than the mainstream publications that purport to be unbiased. As Nikita mentioned in the conversation, reality can seem very cartoonish nowadays. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, I mean, I attribute that more to the mindfulness part, to the extent that it's true, and I'm not claiming that it is, but we do try to be balanced and objective in our presentation of the news up front. Mindfulness in principle gives you a somewhat balanced view of the world. That's part of the idea. That's why it could come in handy if you're dealing with Donald Trump. And I don't guess I need to rehearse the fact that we think the resistance could use more mindfulness. Maybe we should jump. Should we jump right into the Mueller thing, or there's some other emails?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is, this past week has been, a culmination that many people have been anxiously waiting for, and then it hasn't been like a fizzle, but I think it's played out differently than most of us thought it would.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, actually, I'm not so shocked myself. I mean, I tried to be agnostic. I never saw a smoking gun, and I didn't see as close a proximity to that as some people did. But yeah, where to begin?
Well, one thing I mean, people know this point, but a lot of the media is eliding it. The Mueller report has been finished and handed over to the Attorney General. We've seen virtually none of it. We've seen the Attorney General's 4-page summary of it, which had some quotes from it. We've been told that it's, I saw on Twitter today, someone saying it's around 300 pages long. So, we got not even the Cliff Notes version. This is the Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes by a very interested party. So we know there are no more indictments. And we know a couple other things from the summary. And like you said in this episode, that you taped with Marcy Wheeler, there's probably not Barr probably didn't have an explicit lie in that 4-page summary he issued, right, because that would be way too much egg on his face.
I think so.
But he could have just left things out entirely. And there was a tweet that went viral that was saying, could you imagine if Attorney General Janet Reno had done a 4-page summary of the Starr report in 1998 or whatever, and said, there were no indictments coming, and the name Monica Lewinsky would not have to appear in that report, and Monica Lewinsky retweeted that saying if fucking only, and that went viral. But yeah, we need to see the damn report, I think, before we can make any firm conclusions.
Yeah, I do think it can't be. I mean, I can't believe Barr is egregiously misrepresenting what is in the report. I've got to believe the two key things are: no, he did not find sufficient evidence to say that there was collusion, conspiracy, and he was unable to decide on the question of obstruction of justice. I got to think those are the two key things. I think there could be a lot of dirt, including some fresh dirt, in the report. And so I think, yeah, we're not done yet. At the same time, there was a certain amount of confidence expressed by a number of people along the way that there would be some kind of finding on the conspiracy collusion thing. Now, as it happened, I mean, I had been noting along the way reasons to think that there might not be a there. In other words, this came through in a, I've done a couple of dialogues with Russiagate skeptics. I mean, even before the Mueller report was finished, and they've kind of come through there. Now, as it happened, I mean, it was weird. The whole timing of this report thing, I mean, maybe I should just set the context for the last newsletter that people read, which was I had to go to a conference. I had to drive up to a conference Friday night. It started Friday night, drive up Friday afternoon. I tried to get the newsletter pretty much under control so that I could do this. So the newsletter is pretty much done. I was going to have to spend an hour or two on it that night once after I got to the conference. And, of course, as I'm driving up, newsflash, the Mueller report has been handed over to Barr. This is, as has happened so many times, it seems, when we're trying to put the newsletter to bed. There's late breaking news. As it happened, I had already written a thing that was partly about the Jeanine Pirro Fox News thing where enough outrage was mustered to get Fox to suspend her. And so I'd written a thing about when outrage was and wasn't warranted. And I was using the Russiagate as a case where it wasn't so warranted because, look, we're going to find out sooner or later. The report will come out. And I listed a few reasons why we shouldn't expect, why maybe we should lower our expectations. Things like, hey, if Manafort had his own financial reasons to want to do favors for the Russians, maybe that could explain why the Trump campaign did any favors without having to posit some explicit agreement between the Trump campaign and the Russians about the Russians help you in the election, you in return do them favors, right? So I worry a little. So I went ahead and I ran the piece as it had been, but put a preface on it and saying, I'd already written this piece, but it's relevant to the report. Because even as of Saturday, there was, before Barr's letter, there was disappointment that there were no new indictments. That was the first bad sign for people who hoped for the worst for Trump. So I ran the original piece that was written before news of the report and a preface saying, as it happens, I wrote a piece that gives us some reasons that we shouldn't have had our hopes up to begin with. I think I worry that maybe that was taken as a kind of I told you so piece, even though I hadn't really told him so. I mean, would have told you so if this newsletter had come out 4 hours ago. Because we got a letter to that effect. I don't know if that occurred to you. Did you read it that way?
No, I knew I knew the whole background.
Yeah, I called you from the road while driving to the thing and was kind of really highly annoyed that Mueller had finished his report.
It is interesting, just a side note, that he handed it in at 5 p.m. on Friday.
They've done that with a lot of stuff. Haven't a lot of indictments come out on Friday, late Fridays?
I guess that's true, but there's this classic thing that if you want to bury a story,
you want to bury news,
you put it out at 5 p.m. on Friday when the reporters are going home for the weekend and don't want to do any more work. It's peculiar to think about. I don't know exactly why. I mean, maybe Mueller is portrayed as this very straight-laced, by the books, dot all the I's, cross the T's kind of guy. He's not going to go in for a big showy thing. He didn't call a press conference, which is something I guess he probably could have done, but he didn't do that. And so he was. I don't know what to think of that, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that he thinks I'd like people to have time to process this before opining, because traditionally weekends had been thought of as dead space media-wise. So you dump your bad news on Friday, but that's kind of an old school model.
Right.
Because especially in the era of Trump when everyone's so freaked out, it's like everyone's online all the time. So it's kind of an old school model. He may have naively thought this will give the press, 2 days to process it before they write a piece. I can't believe he was that naive, but still that may have been captures some of the logic. I don't know, but he's dumped a lot of stuff on Friday. I totally was not happy about this. And so anyway, we got an email from somebody who canceled their subscription over this. I'll read it.
Right.
Just finished reading the newsletter and was very disappointed in the notes on the Mueller investigation, specifically Robert's assertion that our expectations that it would result in problems for the Trump administration were likely set too high. I can't even begin to express how unhelpful I find that comment. Of course, our expectations were high. People are suffering every day from this administration's actions and are looking for any signs to remain hopeful. I found this week's newsletter the opposite of mindful and am canceling my subscription. That's from former MRN reader Catherine. I'm not sure exactly what she meant by I found this week's newsletter the opposite of mindful. I think she meant mindful in the sense that I was not being attentive to the feelings of readers. Do you think?
Yeah, I can see that. If there's people who are invested a lot of hope in this being the this being like the guillotine that's gonna trap Trump or whatever, and then they're shocked and reeling when they find out that we still have to keep on going with all of this.
Which cat is that just crawled across?
That's Grumpkin. She's the troublesome one. She always wants to come and parade in front of the camera and get attention.
My dog Frazier is a model of restraint. He's taking one of 35 daily naps, mere feet away from me. So anyway, so that made me worry that I had come off as kind of saying I told you so, which I didn't mean to come off as. But I do think, this is certainly evidence that maybe we've invested too much energy on this. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. There may be real stuff coming out of the report. I think the Democrats in Congress are going to try to make it come out. But I would say one thing I would say, and I think Pete, do you know how to pronounce this presidential candidate's last name? Buttigieg, something along those lines. Buttigieg?
Something like that.
Yeah, today Matt Lewis tweeted, I'm going to go with Buddha, Buddha -Judge, JUDGE. I replied, but Matt, Buddhas don't judge. Wasn't that clever?
Yes. And, I read, I think this is accurate, that his father was an immigrant from Malta, and the name derives from Arabic, although he himself is Christian.
Wow. I worry about him. I find him very kind of in some ways appealing as a candidate, smart, interesting things. And one example is what he said about Trump, and then I'll get to why I worry about him. Well, first I'll get to why I worry about him. I think he could be like the Adlai Stevenson of our era. Do you know what that means? You're too young to. I mean, I'm too young to remember Adlai.
Right.
But he was this cerebral guy who kept running against Eisenhower and losing.
And he has a famous anecdote, possibly apocryphal, where a woman approaches him at a rally and says, Mr. Stevenson, you have the vote of every thinking American. And he says, ma'am, I need a majority.
Yeah. Well, sadly, there's a little something. Well, anyway, I worry, right? Because he says smart stuff, but he just doesn't have that. I mean, leaving aside the question of whether middle America is ready to vote for a gay person, right? Leaving that aside, he just doesn't. He reminds me of Chris Murphy in the sense that he says very smart stuff. Senator from Connecticut, but he doesn't. The delivery, actually, Buttigieg's delivery is probably better than Murphy's, but I don't think it's. I don't see it really playing in all parts of America where he needs to play well. I don't know. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know a ton about him. I guess we'll have to see how he will fare. He certainly seems like an interesting person, and there's been all these anecdotes about how he taught himself Norwegian and did stuff like that. Yeah,
a surefire ticket to winning the middle American vote.
Right. I mean, I think he's at this point he's easier to imagine as someone who would be in the cabinet of, or possibly the running mate of, someone else with more experience. I mean, has a mayor. Well, okay, so I don't think a mayor has ever jumped to become president. But then again,
not a mayor of, is it South Bend?
South Bend, Indiana. But then
not
again, someone, whatever you want to call Trump, a real estate developer with no prior
mayors
in public office, has never become president either.
They used to talk about John Lindsay of New York as a candidate. I think he may have actually run. I'm not sure. But that was New York City. That wasn't South Bend. And they talk about mayors. Who's the mayor of L.A. that they talk about? Whoever he is, they talk about him.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's never, and like Bloomberg, but it's never actually happened successfully or even gotten on the ticket as far as I can remember from. So, I highly unlikely, I would say.
Anyway, what he did say, I'm paraphrasing and I'm sure I'm distorting it, but he said something to the effect that I'm going to get mixed up between what he said and what I already thought. But he said, but if you put the two together, you get something like, if you thought that the Mueller report was going to end our trouble, you misunderstand what the problem is. I mean, even if it magically swept Trump off the stage, you have to understand that Trump is just a symptom. There are reasons that he was elected. There are a lot of people in America deeply unhappy with the political system. There are a lot who are deeply angry at people that they perceive as patronizing, if not contemptuous, coastal elites. And there are people very unhappy about immigration. There are people very unhappy about their economic prospects. There's a lot of things that together got Trump elected, and they are all worthy of our attention, including growing income inequality. It's just and I think that's probably, I suspect that what he said is, for my money, a more interesting response than we got from any other presidential candidate. But I encourage us not to give him any momentum as a candidate, precisely.
Yeah, I think I saw a quote from him. This might have been the same quote. It was like a couple paragraphs, and he said something like, "There are millions of people out there who knew that Trump was a bad person, and they voted for him anyway. And we need to figure out why that happened." I think that. Yeah,
that's. I'm not sure that is the same thing, and I'm not sure I totally buy that. I basically think there's this human tendency such that once you're going to support somebody, you convince yourself that they're not that bad. Now, I do think there was a lot of, that thing about him bothers me, but I don't think that many of the people who voted for him believe he's as gravely bad a person as some of us think he is.
It's hard to know, and he has millions of evangelical Christian fans who, and there's books written about like the faith of Donald Trump and stuff like this. And there's also like this classic thing of like, he's a bastard, but he's our bastard. There are people thinking like he's going to go sit down with whoever, sit down with the Xi Jinping and hammer out a deal and be tough as nails. And that, we want that kind of guy on our team. So Trump was able to successfully portray himself as that kind of person, even though he isn't really that kind of person. So that was like a skillful use of trickery or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the personal character thing, it's like how, does this matter anymore at all in terms of a president when you have someone who like plainly is not a choir boy and people are fine with that? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's really unfortunate how many kind of precedents Trump has said. There's this phrase, defining deviancy down. Do you know that phrase?
Yeah.
It came from conservatives. So I think about 30 years ago, we're worried that, I forget the exact context, but it was something I
think it was like Moynihan. I thought
I think maybe it was Moynihan. And he's saying we more and more tolerate things that used to be considered deviant. Now, I don't know in what realm he was speaking, honestly, whether he was talking about the sexual proclivity or being a scofflaw or what, but
he was talking about like black families and like urban crime and stuff.
It could be that. I mean, that was an area of interest for him. But Trump has done so much defining deviancy down, right? I mean, it's like the next president. I mean, there's just so many things that now we think are not a crazy thing for a president to do that 4 years ago we thought were a crazy thing for a president to do. Some of them abhorrent, some of them just weird. And I mean, on the one hand, they still are associated with Trump so closely that I think there will be an expectation that the next person is going to be different. But gosh, it's crazy. So I don't know. We don't bring uplift this week, do we, Arya?
No, but I mean, if you go back to Clinton's election in '92, like since then the presidents have kind of been rejections of the previous one, in their different ways. So Trump is very much the opposite of Obama. I don't think another Trumpian figure is like on the scene right now who could step into the shoes. Like Mike Pence is not a Trumpian figure. He's just classic.
No, but conservative. But another message from Trump is they can come out of nowhere. Not that I don't mean that we hadn't heard of Trump, but no one took him seriously as a presidential candidate. He swooped in using social media and other modern tricks of the trade, and boom. It's a little like, I mean, just look at the way AOC, who was an insurgent candidate, is 29 years old, has swept in and become a dominant presence in a way that used to be just about impossible for a freshman in Congress, right? Mm-hmm. And the landscape has changed. Social media permits new things. It's like Beto. Beto is another example. It's like, the thing that did him, I think, his big breakthrough was that clip where he defended, kneeling during the national anthem, right? Mm-hmm. And people went crazy. One clip. So I don't, by the way, one quick Beto question. Isn't the consistency of his intensity a little weird? Did we talk about this last time? Who did I talk to?
No.
You know what I mean? It's like traditionally, and maybe we're in a new age, social media makes it different. Traditionally, great orators have kind of, paced themselves. They will, speak in a lower key way, then build to a crescendo. Beto, it's like every sentence is the most intense thing you've ever heard. He's using his hands the same way. You know what I mean? I'm not imagining this, right?
I don't actually watch a ton of video of politicians talking because I don't have cable and don't usually choose to do that. But I mean, yeah, and he's, the thing that people are making fun of on Twitter over the past couple of weeks is he keeps on jumping up on like countertops and diners and coffee shops to address the crowd. And people are like, dude, you can just stand there and you'll be fine. So yeah, he does have a weird energy. I don't see him really going anywhere because he seems kind of empty at his core and is just like, here's a handsome.
Oh yeah. And we would never have a president who's empty at his core, right?
Well, I think Trump has like no soul.
What?
Trump has like no soul, but
Beto has a brain. What are you saying he doesn't have?
Well, I think Beto is just kind of a like repackaging of like Democratic policy over the past like decade or so in a like package that appeals to younger people. And like there's probably some of it is that people think he's Hispanic, even though he's not Hispanic. So yeah, there's that. And just looping back, I think you're right. So without social media, it's hard to see Trump. I mean, we'll be trying to figure out what caused Trump for 100 years, and it's multi-causal. But without social media, I think reality TV is the real prime thing, because if there's no Apprentice, then Trump remains a New York area kind of figure who's kind of a figure of fun and appears in like cameos in movies and TV, but is long past his prime.
I think that's true, but I don't think the message is you can only be a candidate who flies in out of nowhere if you've done a reality TV show. I do think we are in a new media landscape. The parties have less power than ever. The media stage is more open than ever to anybody who can make a splash. And I do think you could get all kinds of candidates. Anyway, I certainly think, to get back to your point, that you could find an heir to this kind of economic ethno-nationalist well, mainly ethno-nationalist, kind of niche that Trump or fills. That sentence didn't make sense, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's there's a couple like people in Congress who line up with this. One is that guy Steve King, who likes to associate with explicit white supremacists. Another is this young congressman from Florida, Matt Gertz, who kind of acts like a little mini Trump and does kind of like stunts that Trump would do, and is a bombastic character. I don't know. I really I think what's holding the Trump coalition together really is Trump and his bizarre like cult of personality that he's developed. And if he like had a heart attack tomorrow and Mike Pence took over, I think it would kind of turn more into what it was during the Bush and Obama years.
You mean conservatism would?
Yeah, I kind of don't like. Is there going to be like a Trump Leadership Institute that's like training the next generation of Trump politicians?
I don't think there has to be. I think you just need a sufficiently opportunistic politician. It's like somebody is opportunistic. Well, maybe I don't know that that's the case, but you take a Ted Cruz, who seems to me pretty opportunistic. If he could make the transition, and convince people that now he's very tough on immigration, I think he'd be willing to. And people, this is accepted in politicians all the time. Now I've seen the light, So you can imagine a politician just pivoting on one immigration and on one issue like immigration, and suddenly he's the new Trump.
Right, but the thing that, like, one of the many things that distinguished Trump in 2016 was he ran to the left of the GOP on a lot of issues related to the welfare state, and he said, Social Security and Medicare will be totally fine. We're going to have this great infrastructure. People will be put to work again. So it was the opposite of traditional ideological conservatism since we've known it since,
yeah, but he's abandoned most of that, and his base seems to have forgiven him. And that reinforces the idea that a lot of what this is about is anger and resentment. Anger about immigration, resentment of elites, not that it wasn't about the other thing, and not that he wouldn't have been smarter to deliver on some of the economic populism, but that the old thing that if a politician can keep a population fearful and resentful, that's almost all you got to do. I mean, look at Bibi Netanyahu in Israel, or Bolsonaro in Brazil. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I do not think we will have to quit worrying about Trumpism when Trump is off the stage.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say. There's, like you said, there's a lot of people who have been elected into office in the past 5 years or so in the West who are embracing this more like hard right, quasi-fascistic line, and like Bolsonaro, people say he's the Trump of the tropics, and he seems much worse than Trump because he seems competent and also like to sincerely believe that people should be like shot in the streets and stuff like that, whereas Trump like isn't confident at all. So it does, like, things are happening globally and things you've written about that make this like tendency that seems to be latent in political systems more likely to come out. But I still think Trump is such a strange sui generis figure that there's no natural heir to him. And okay, well, let me say this. This thing came out this past week that the Betsy DeVos's budget was going to cut all the funding that the federal government supplied to the Special Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, you know more about this than all I saw was the headline, but my mind is still being blown by the fact that any politician could say, yeah, let's zero out funding for the Special Olympics.
Yeah, it seems very tone deaf and the kind of thing that like an ideological conservative would do. And then Jeet here just tweeted something I saw where he was like responding to someone saying, "Why this is so stupid? Why would they ever do this just in the politics?" And He was saying, "Well, the cruelty towards people who are different or people who are weak is like part of it. This is like a theory that some people have that
I refuse to believe that I know, obviously this makes us all immediately think of Nazi Germany, but I refuse to believe that that an appreciable part of Trump's base is like wantonly cruel.
Or even cares about cares either way, really, I guess. Thinks about the Special Olympics really at all, as most of us probably don't think about.
They either just don't have an attitude or they think that's kind of mean to take.
Yeah, so I replied to Jeet, if Trump had doubled the budget for the Special Olympics, I think the Trump base would be just as satisfied with that as zeroing out the budget for the Special Olympics, because that's, they're just happy with whatever Trump is just, that's Trump doing his thing. And there's some things they care about. They seem to actually care about the wall, but most of it, it's like, well, Trump says it's good, so I trust Trump.
Yeah, well, in general, with tribalization, if you'll pardon the expression, the kind of dynamic that we're calling tribalism, this is what happens is, as opposed to what you might think is the normal kind of democratic dynamic in a democracy where people's choice of candidates is subordinate to their position on policies, right? They know what policies they want. They'll vote for the candidate who champions them. What starts happening when there's deep polarization is that the leader on your team, it's like whatever policies they stand for are good and whatever, and not without limit. I mean, but in all the gray areas where you don't care deeply, you'll kind of go along with whatever they say. And the reverse is that if the resistance thinks Trump is associated with Russia, then suddenly they're cold warriors. Mm-hmm. And this is one thing that, bothered me about the way Russia Gate was playing out all along. And I think it's one thing that bothered, the Glenn Greenwalds, Michael Tracy's, Aaron Mate's of the world too. The people who are now doing their victory laps. Did we already say that one of the victory laps can be seen on Blogging Heads TV in my conversation with Aaron Mate? And I also did one with, on the other side of the argument with Marcy Wheeler. I'm not sure if I plugged that. Anyway, that's the problem. One of the problems with tribalism. So where were we? So we were talking about, could there be another Trump? Was that in turn a branch off of some other thing we had promised to talk about? You're talking about Mueller.
Well, yeah, we're talking about Mueller. I honestly don't remember how we got.
Hey, well, if
we got there.
If a guy your age can't remember, there's no hope for my having a recollection. But maybe we should turn to. I mean, is there the other thing? I mean, I saw a piece saying the Mueller report is good news, clears the decks. Democrats can talk about policy now. I actually don't think that's going to happen. I think for a while there's going to be this struggle over the release of the Mueller report. I think there's probably going to be at least some dirt that Democrats are going to try to make hay of over it. They're going to subpoena people, blah, blah. I think it's going to dominate a lot of news cycles for some time to come. Yeah,
and I mean, what people maybe are in the excitement of this are overlooking is that, this Mueller's brief was specific related to the 2016 campaign and Russia or any other country. Donald Trump has been operating since the 1970s, and more continues to come out about very shady, questionable things he's done, inflating his net worth, screwing over vendors. That's been known for decades. There's a piece today in the Washington Post about how he would submit financial statements to an insurance company that were massively, or not massively, but markedly inflated, such as saying that Trump Tower was 10 stories taller than it actually was. That's something pretty easy to check. So that kind of stuff will, I think, continue to be investigated. And then it's like, so this is before he became a political figure. But he, I'm sorry, well, maybe I'm not sorry. He's definitely guilty of some financial or related.
Oh, he's definitely committed crimes. I mean, we know about crimes he's committed. He's committed tax fraud. He's
right. So I think all those investigations, I think, will continue. I think the people, the House Democrats should continue to look into those things. Try to get some of these people to testify under oath. The guy who was, I think his name is Alan Weisselberg. He was the head of the CFO of the Trump organization. Yeah. He probably knows a lot. And yeah, Trump was like a crooked, shady businessman and did a lot of shady stuff. So continuing to investigate that kind of stuff, I think, is worth time, because it like doesn't waste. It like takes up Trump's time as well, and Trump can't focus on doing whatever Trumpian thing he wants to plan to do that day. He has to be angry all the time and be sending angry tweets and stuff. I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to hear a lot more about this, and it's a weird. I'm starting to doubt the wisdom of the special prosecutor statute as it stands. What we're dealing with is the statute as it was revised after the Ken Starr kind of thing, where Ken Starr wrote, for those of you too young to remember, he wrote like is the term pot boiler or bodice ripper or what? I mean, what are the? Did you read the whole Starr report? It was gripping. I couldn't stop. It was.
I was a bit too young to be.
Oh man, it was like the New York Times printed the thing in full, so it wasn't as long as the Mueller report. And I mean, and I don't know if this was the report per se or just a narrative within it, but it was like, much longer than a short story, but maybe shorter than a novel. But it was just gripping. And I mean, Starr laid it out, wanting to get as many people to read it and hate Clinton as possible. And I mean, I'm imputing certain motivations to him, but I think there's reason to believe he was pretty intensely motivated. Starr was. But anyway, the statute was revised so that for not only for that reason by any means, but for whatever reason, in a way that does give the Attorney General all this discretion. And it seems to me like too much discretion. I mean, remember, the Attorney General is usually someone who is appointed by the president we are investigating. In this case, he was appointed after he submitted a de facto job application indicating that he was sure Trump hadn't committed obstruction of justice. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know what kind of statute leaves us all in the hands of the Attorney General. That seems to me kind of nuts.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this plays out. I mean, it seems like couldn't the House Judiciary Committee subpoena the document and then put it online or something?
They can, but even that depends on the fact that the Democrats did win the midterms, and so they have the subpoena power. Imagine if both houses were in the hands of the Republicans.
Right.
Yeah, no, that will matter. That will matter.
Yeah, and it does. After if the 4-alarm emergency of Trump ends, I think there will hopefully be a period of reflection and reform of thinking like, well, how did this happen exactly? And what can we do to prevent it from happening? And some of the things that were previously just, norms that were never codified in law would start to be codified in law. Like they have to release 10 years of their tax returns, presidential candidates, and things along those lines that Trump, because he has no shame, can just bulldoze past.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a law that they have to release their tax returns. But, in some ways, this kind of thing is becoming more and more likely. The Democrats, in response to, I think, the valid complaints by the Bernie Sanders people that the deck was stacked against them last time around, the Democrats have now weakened the control of party elites over the nomination. They've weakened the power of the superdelegates. And when you think about it, one reason Trump happened is because party elites don't have very much power. I mean, the Republican Party would have loved to stop Trump, but they couldn't. And I'm not sure they will be able to next time. We've been talking a while. Should we call it a day? Should we get into this email about Quillette?
Yeah, let's do Quillette, but somewhat more expeditiously than the previous part.
We did this. It's just an email from Graham. We had identified Quillette as a conservative website. We didn't mean to be pejorative or anything. We were just writing something about Quillette. Quillette isn't a, quote, conservative website. Saying so is misleading. This is from Graham. Saying so is misleading at best and dishonest at worst. Graham, take it easy, dude. I'm not sure I like the innuendo there, are you? Dishonest at worst. Graham continues, also, and worse so, saying so could lead otherwise liberal readers to come to believe that they're conservative, which wouldn't help the overall liberal cause. Put another way, please Google search and study Steven Pinker's notion of the left pole, in parentheses, analogous to the North Pole. Get it? And then please stop engaging in left pole thinking, please, Benjamin. I actually failed to Google left pole. Have you Googled left pole? I'll Google it while you respond. Because I know you think, I'm going to Google left pole. You think that Graham should cease and desist, right? You think it's a conservative website, plain and simple.
Well, I guess what I would say is it's a website that promotes like a new iteration of conservatism, but can still definitely be called conservative. It's very identified with the intellectual dark web. The people on the intellectual dark web have a few token conservatives, like Brett Weinstein or Stein and his wife.
Stein.
Brett Weinstein.
Well, wait, it's Harvey Weinstein, right? Brett hastens to distinguish the pronunciation from Harvey's pronunciation. I know that. So whatever Harvey's is, Brett's isn't.
So yeah, this is, I mean, it's not there's no like IDW headquarters. So Quillette is not like issued forth from IDW headquarters, but it's basically the, aligning with those ideas. And I see a lot of the intellectual dark web as like trying to say that like, the traditional things that liberals believed in, like those are all good, but like the past couple of years or so, there's been this crazy group of people who are just taking it way too far. The SJWs, they're starting to go way over the line and they're ruining everything that like was good about this noble intellectual tradition. And so we need to like look at these other things in order to combat the forces of social justice that's trying to pervert everything. And a lot of it is like, there's like people who's like, I used to call myself liberal, but then something happened to me and, someone threw a pie in my face or the equivalent of that. And then I sadly had to join the conservative ranks in order to like, continue to pursue justice in my life because those people over there on the left are, they've gone loony. So I don't think they publish a lot of things that you could say like, yeah, this is liberal actually. It's mostly things critiquing why the image of liberalism or leftism or social justice warriorism that they have, critiquing that and saying that is really bad.
And your cat is going to great lengths to enter the picture.
Yes, this is one of her classic moves, is to jump on the back of the chair.
Yeah, so I guess, well, first of all, I did Google left pole, and I'm here to tell you what it means. A mythical place where any belief that doesn't conform to your ideology appears to be right-leaning. You can say the same thing about the right, so there could be a right pole. Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is like, I think the reason people in the intellectual dark web, and by extension Quillette, or maybe it's the other way around anyway, they're kind of close to one and the same, I think, ideologically. I think the reason they get called conservative in the first place is because they seem to spend all their time complaining about things that people on the left do, namely social justice warriors. Now, they would say, no, we just champion free speech and the willingness to entertain heterodox ideas. And right now, it's the left that poses the threat to free speech, in particular on campus, and is unwilling to entertain ideas that don't align with their ideology. And the problem with that argument has been pointed out most vociferously by Glenn Greenwald. And anything Glenn has pointed out, you could say he has done it more vociferously than anyone else, I think it's safe to say. But then when it comes to like Ilhan Omar being accused by the right of violating a speech code, right, in the things that she says about AIPAC or whatever, when the people whose speech is being suppressed are on the left and the suppressors are on the right, the intellectual dark web falls silent, which I think, as a matter of fact, is I haven't done a study, but I certainly think that, yeah, in fact, Glenn challenged Eric Weinstein. I think it was either in the Ilhan Omar case or in another case of somebody getting wrapped on the knuckles by the establishment for criticism of Israel that was supposedly anti-Semitic or something like that. And Glenn kind of challenged Eric Weinstein, and Weinstein said, "Yeah, kind of. I'm still thinking about it." I mean, he didn't do the thing that would have undermined Glenn's argument and saying, "You're right, it's intolerable. All we have to have, the robust expression of even unpopular opinions has to blah blah blah." They don't buy that. Whereas, I think that various things that are called racist by the left, at least some things, they're more willing to defend in the name of robust speech and so on. So I think that's the problem they encounter if they're going to argue that they're not conservative, is why is it that in this one, and this is one of the few cases where I think the shoe is clearly on the other foot, that it's the left whose speech is said to run afoul of some speech code. Why don't they step in and defend the left? I think that's a question they have to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just searched for the word Ilhan on Quillette. There are two articles. One is called "Confronting a New Threat to Female Athletics." Not sure what that connection is. And one is called "Are Anti-BDS Laws an Assault on Free Speech?" So I
hope there's a chance they'd say that anti-BDS laws are an assault on free speech. I mean, I don't think Quillette is like so far right that they would come out in favor of anti-BDS laws that, in one way or another punish people, like by denying them state contracts if they support BDS.
Well, I guess you'll have to read to find out, because the headline makes it clickbait. And
read the last sentence. That usually tells us. What is the last sentence?
Let's see. Here's the last couple sentences. Might an anti-BDS act be justified under different cultural and strategic conditions? Certainly, and I'm skeptical of any movement that commands the support of both Ilhan Omar and Linda Sarsour, not to mention a bona fide terrorist, with a link to someone, not sure who that is. But given how many progressives oppose current Israeli policies, and given how little impact BDS has had on either the Jewish state or our own, this seems like a case where a little pluralism would go a long way. So that seems like a weak defense.
That does seem weak. We are defending this speech because there aren't enough people saying it yet, right? You should be allowed to say this until an appreciable number of people want to say it, and then we might rethink.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, so yeah, it seems like they're saying, like, BDS is not a powerful movement, so there's no point in having an anti-BDS law.
That's not the most principled argument I've heard against these laws.
Right, and I've actually been thinking this for a while, that there's a lot of people who like to claim the mantle of free speech, and some of these people have profited very nicely by doing so over the past couple of years. Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and people like this, the idea as a whole, and it's like, I don't know. I think there's very few people who are actually true free speech absolutists and would defend speech in all its possible permutations from any sort of, like, either government censure or societal censure. And if you kind of go down the list of, starting with the classic things like screaming fire in a crowded room, where I think everyone has some lines somewhere where they're saying, okay, past this, your speech should not be protected. And then it's like, okay, so we're just fighting over the line, essentially. If you acknowledge there's some line, right, then we're arguing over the line.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I don't want to make it sound simpler than it is, because I do think there's a place. Well, see, I think there's a place for speech codes, but by that I don't mean legal codes, right? Like, I think, having an ethnically diverse country is not a trivially easy thing to do. And I think having, informal speech codes that strongly discourage, things like the N-word is fine. But there shouldn't be a law against it. It's just that people should be stigmatized. So I'm personally not the most robust kind of champion for, but to me, let me back up. That's not a free speech issue in the classic sense. When we say free speech, we're usually talking about the constitutional protection of speech against the state's, stifling of it. And,
right,
and
but
there I am close to an absolutist, I guess. I don't know.
But yeah, this fight is usually not around things like state action against someone for their speech. It's usually around a public speaker at a college, or someone writes an essay, or someone hangs up a poster and someone else rips it down, those kind of things. So it's more free speech than the
although I think that constitutional protection of free speech has come to be implicated in those college cases by virtue of the fact that the colleges receive federal funding or something. To me, it seems like an extension that the founders probably didn't have in mind, but I actually think it's recognized in the courts as a relevant fact in considering these cases. I'm not sure.
Right. So, the way these things have played out recently is like a controversial right-wing speaker appears on a college campus. A bunch of students, go on stage and hold up posters and yell stuff so the guy can't give the address he wanted to. And then, everyone makes a big to-do about that. And so when I think that the people who find the appeal of the IDW, it's more in that kind of stuff and condemning the protesters trying to shout down the conservative speaker than in like the state intervening, because that doesn't really happen all that much.
Yeah. I mean, I think a number of the people in the IDW are sympathetic to it are people who have personally had very unpleasant experiences at the hands of social justice warriors. And Brett Weinstein actually had a truly traumatic experience. I mean, it got ugly. Like, apparently there were people driving around and there was reason to believe they wanted to do violence to him. And, I think, in evolutionary psychology, I've been disappointed as a longstanding advocate of evolutionary psychology. I've been disappointed to see how many evolutionary psychologists turn out to seem like they're on the right, which I'm not. But I think one reason is that in asserting that there are actual gender differences that have some genetic basis, they've gotten a ton of blowback. And that has kind of hardened them against the campus left. And this is the way, people, these emotional things really shape the way people come out on issues.
Yeah. And maybe my final thought would be like, there's been a parallel growth between the SJW, quote unquote, who wants to shut down speech, and the technological ability of any person in the world to make their statement known to anyone else in the world through Twitter, YouTube, or whatever.
Right.
So, if Charles Murray gets like shut down at some college campus, he can go on YouTube and say whatever he wants, and anyone who wants to watch it can watch it. And
not only that,
very hard to get kicked off of YouTube for the content that you say.
Not only that, but more people will watch it because of what happened at Middlebury.
Exactly. So so he becomes a martyr, and so on. So I think there has to be a connection between the fact that there are more and more people on the far left who think that like there are more things that should never be said at all, ideas or words, with the growth in the fact that anyone can say whatever the hell they want on Twitter, and unless you're threatening to murder someone, like you can stay on Twitter and keep on saying it.
Yeah.
So okay. I don't know what we do about that.
Yeah. I don't have an immediate solution. So I guess so. We've probably talked a while. Plus, I'm kind of antsy to try out my earbuds. I could do an opening. Nah. Even though I don't have the Galaxy S10 that would pair with them automatically, I still want to try them on. So, is there anything else we should say? I mean, the usual expression of deep thanks to our patrons.
Right.
And
re-emphasize that a normal newsletter will not be forthcoming this week.
That's right. I said that in the last newsletter. Is that, and I'll tell you why. Is like, I'm close to the brink. Let's just put it. I just sometimes you keep doing this week after week and other things pile up. In this case, what's piled up is something that I have to do in order to, or promise to do, in order to get philanthropic support for another enterprise in the audio video space, the Blogging Heads TV, Meeting Live TV space. And it's got to happen. And so I just, but I mean, we say on the Patreon page how many issues we're going to put out a year. We stand by that. They will still happen. This just means a shorter summer vacation for us. And there may be a little note from me that I send out, but if it's just a note, just like a note from Bob, that won't count as an issue. So.
And I just saw on Twitter that Trump has announced that he is overruling Betsy DeVos on Special Olympics funding. He says, "I have overridden my people. We're funding the Special Olympics." That's a quote from Trump. So Trump at least has slightly better political instincts.
The man is a genius. The man is a political genius. Who knows? Maybe all this was an act so that he could swoop in and save the Special Olympics.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. I don't know. I don't think he thinks more than like 36 hours ahead. He's very reactive. So hard to say.
Yeah. I think I think you're right in this case, but good thinking, Donald. That was good. Okay, so anyway, we'll see what happens with Mueller and everything else, and we will see people again.
Okay, thanks.
See you, Ari. Whoops.